Some say you never hear the bullet that kills you. That final betrayal arrives without warning, swift, silent, absolute. I heard mine. It came across a white tablecloth in our favorite seafood restaurant, waves crashing outside the window, champagne still effervescent in crystal glasses. 8 years of marriage, and there my husband sat, introducing his pregnant secretary like she was a new business acquisition. She had this little smirk on her face, one hand protectively cradling her swollen belly while he announced they wanted our house in the divorce. The audacity made my blood surge with an anger I refused to show. Instead, I took a sip of wine and studied them over the rim of my glass. They thought they won before the battle had even begun. Thought they blindsided me with their little announcement. What they didn't know was that I'd been preparing for war long before they declared it. I sat across from Elio in our favorite seafood restaurant, the one with the ocean view and the sound of waves always crashing in the background. 8 years of marriage, and there he was, introducing his pregnant secretary Genevieve like she was a new business acquisition. She had this little smirk on her face, one hand resting protectively on her swollen belly, while Elio announced they were having a baby together and wanted our house in the divorce. The audacity of them both made my blood surge with an anger I refused to show. I took a sip of my wine instead, studying Genevieve over the rim of my glass. She was younger than me, of course 30 to my 42, with the kind of effortless beauty that made men like Elio believe they deserved second chances at youth. "And you're certain the baby is Elio's?" I asked, my voice steady. Her smirk faltered for a split second, just a tiny crack in her composure, but I caught it. Elio stiffened beside her. "Of course it's mine," he snapped, defensive, too defensive. I nodded slowly, watching them both. There was something in their exchange that confirmed what I'd already suspected. The late nights, the business trips that seemed unnecessary, the way he'd positioned his computer screen away from me when I brought him coffee in his home office. "We've been careful about documentation," Elio continued, his corporate voice taking over. Documentation, like this was another contract he was negotiating. "When is the baby due?" I asked, directing the question to Genevieve. "August 15th, she said promptly, her hand making another circular motion on her stomach. I did the math quickly. 4 months along meant conception in December, the week Elio was supposedly at a finance conference in San Diego. The same week I'd hired Naomi, the private investigator I'd been consulting since the first time I'd suspected Elio's infidelity. "I see," I said, carefully setting down my wine glass. "And the house that's non-negotiable." Elio leaned forward, his handsome face arranged in the expression he used when explaining complex financial matters to clients. "Candace, be reasonable. It's what's best for the baby. You're a successful attorney. You can buy another home." "The house was purchased primarily with my inheritance," I reminded him, "and it's titled largely in my name." Genevieve's smirk returned. Elio explained how California community property works. "Nice try, but we'll get half regardless of whose name is on the deed." I allowed myself a small smile. "Actually, I think you'll find the situation is more complicated than that." I stood up, smoothing my skirt. "My attorney will be in touch. I suggest you both prepare for a paternity test, where a judge will likely order one anyway, given the timing and the significant assets involved." Elio leaned back, attempting to project confidence. "Fine, I have nothing to hide. I'll take the test." "Good," I said, picking up my purse. "And this doesn't change our position on the house." "Actually," I said, "it might, especially when combined with other relevant factors." I left them sitting there, Genevieve's smirk faltering again, Elio's confident mask slipping just enough to reveal the uncertainty beneath. Outside, the ocean air was cool against my heated skin. I took a deep breath, letting it fill my lungs, steadying myself against the railing overlooking the beach. Behind me, I could feel their eyes watching through the restaurant's plate glass windows. I didn't turn around, didn't need to. They thought they won before the battle had even begun. Thought they blindsided me with their little announcement. What they didn't know was that Naomi, former FBI, now freelance, had been monitoring Elio's activities for the past 7 months, not because I was a jealous wife, but because I was a cautious businesswoman. When the first signs of Elio's infidelity appeared, I hadn't confronted him in tears. I'd started preparing. Back at my office, I closed the door and kicked off my heels, allowing myself a moment of genuine emotion now that I was alone. My hands trembled slightly as I poured a finger of whiskey from the bottle I kept in my bottom drawer. Not from shock I'd suspected the affair for months, but from the strange relief of finally having it confirmed, of knowing the battle ahead. "How'd it go?" Cleo's voice came from the doorway. My attorney and oldest friend from law school stood there, her tall frame leaning against the door jamb, concern evident in her dark eyes. As expected, I replied, taking a sip of whiskey. They want the house. Genevieve is 4 months pregnant. And, and there was a moment, just a flicker, when I questioned the paternity. Something passed between them. I set down my glass and pulled out my phone, scrolling to Naomi's number. Cleo closed the door and took the seat across from my desk. You think the baby might not be his? I think it's worth investigating. I sent Naomi a text, need deeper background on Genevieve Parker. Focus on December. Possible other relationships. My phone buzzed almost immediately with Naomi's response on it. We'll update report by tomorrow. I sipped my whiskey and opened Naomi's most recent report dated just 3 weeks ago. Photos of Elio and Genevieve entering a hotel. Financial records showing Elio had opened a separate checking account and was transferring funds. Text messages retrieved from his cloud backup. Naomi was right about him, I said, more to myself than to Cleo. He lacks authentic charm. He's performing his life, not living it, she'd said once, and I should have listened. I would listen now. My phone buzzed again. Elio this time. Coming home tonight. The question carried layers of meaning. Was I too emotional to face him? Would I be staying at a hotel to nurse my wounded pride? Was I making this difficult? I typed back a single word. Yes. Let him wonder what that meant. Let him spend the night puzzled, uncertain whether I was returning to pack my things or beg him to reconsider. What's the strategy? Cleo asked, watching me closely. We continue gathering evidence. We file for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences, nothing messy or public yet. We demand the paternity test, and we protect the house. I tapped my fingers on the desk, thinking, Archer Holdings is still secure. Cleo nodded. The LLC is solid. Your brother has maintained all the necessary documentation as trustee. The house transfer was completed 14 months ago, well before any of this surfaced publicly. I nodded, a small weight lifting. The most critical move had come 14 months ago when I created Archer Holdings LLC, named after my dad's middle name, and strategically transferred ownership of the beach house to it. On paper, it appeared to be a routine asset protection measure common among high-earning professionals. In reality, it was insurance against exactly this scenario. Good, I said. Then we proceed carefully. No emotional displays, no accusations without evidence, just the steady application of legal pressure. Cleo smiled, the sharp, knowing smile that had intimidated opposing counsel for 15 years. Arthur Walsh is representing Elio. He called this afternoon to schedule a preliminary meeting. I raised an eyebrow. Walsh was expensive, aggressive, and had a reputation for scorched earth tactics in high-asset divorces. Interesting choice. Tells me he's planning to fight dirty. Are we concerned? I considered this, swirling the amber liquid in my glass. No. Walsh relies on intimidation and emotional manipulation. We'll remain calm, professional, and 10 steps ahead. My phone buzzed with another text from Naomi. Preliminary search shows, G. Parker had regular appointments at Elevation Fitness and Deck, checking for PT relationship. I showed the text to Cleo, whose eyebrows rose slightly. Personal trainer. Would explain her sudden interest in fitness last winter. I mused. Elio mentioned she'd started working out more. I thought nothing of it at the time. If there was another relationship during the conception window, then we have leverage, I finished. But we need proof, not speculation. I glanced at my watch. Almost 8. If I went home now, I'd find Elio pacing, rehearsing whatever speech he'd prepared. He'd expect tears, recriminations, maybe even begging. The thought of disappointing those expectations gave me a small, cold satisfaction. I'll head home, I said, standing and slipping back into my heels. Keep the professional mask in place, gather intel on his strategy, and give him nothing to work with. Cleo stood as well. Remember, he'll try to make you emotional. That's when mistakes happen. I've been living with Elio for 8 years, I said, picking up my briefcase. I've learned from the master of emotional manipulation. Trust me, he'll get nothing. The house was dark when I arrived, save for the soft glow from Elio's home office. I entered quietly, setting my keys in the bowl by the door with deliberate noise enough to announce my presence without seeming theatrical about it. I heard his chair scrape back, then footsteps moving toward the hallway. I busied myself with hanging up my coat, keeping my movements unhurried. Candace, he said, appearing in the doorway. He'd loosened his tie and rolled up his sleeves, his version of looking casual and approachable. I wasn't sure you'd come home. I gave him a measured look. This is my house. A flash of annoyance crossed his face before he could mask it. Good. Let him feel off balance. We need to talk about this, he said, taking a step toward me. I know it's a shock, but not now, Elio. I interrupted, my voice deliberately calm. It's been a long day. We can discuss it tomorrow. I moved past him toward the stairs, feeling his eyes on me. This wasn't the reaction he'd prepared for. He'd expected anger, tears, demands for explanation. My calm dismissal left him without a script. Candace, he tried again, an edge of frustration in his voice. This is serious. We can't just. I'm perfectly aware of how serious it is, I said, pausing on the stairs to look back at him. That's why I'm not having this conversation when I'm tired. Good night, Elio. I continued up the stairs, my heart pounding despite my outward composure. In our bedroom, I changed into silk pajamas and went through my evening routine with meticulous care, as if this were any other night, only when I was beneath the covers, lights out. Did I allow myself to acknowledge the hollow feeling in my chest? Not grief for the marriage that had been dying by inches for years. No, this was mourning for the woman I'd been 8 years ago, who had believed in Elio's charming facade and thought she'd found a true partner. That woman was gone now, replaced by someone stronger, more cautious, more strategic. I heard Elio come up the stairs an hour later, pause outside the door, then enter quietly. He moved around the room in the dark, changing clothes, brushing teeth in the ensuite bathroom. When he finally slipped into bed, he maintained a careful distance, as if uncertain of his welcome. I kept my breathing deep and regular, feigning sleep. After several minutes, I felt him shift slightly. I know you're awake, he said softly. I didn't respond. Let him wonder. Let him spend the night in uncertainty. It was the least he deserved. Morning light filtered through the plantation shutters, casting striped shadows across the bed. I opened my eyes to find Elio watching me, propped on one elbow. For a moment, in the gentle dawn light, I saw echoes of the man I'd married before ambition and ego had hollowed him out. Morning, he said, his voice careful, testing. Morning, I replied, keeping my tone neutral but not cold, the kind of voice you'd use with a colleague you didn't particularly like but had to maintain professional relations with. He sat up, studying me. About last night. Not now, Elio. I cut him off smoothly. I have a 9 o'clock. We can discuss it later. Before he could respond, I picked up my phone from the nightstand and headed to the bathroom, leaving him sitting in bed, baffled by my composure. The small victory energized me as I showered and dressed for the day, selecting a charcoal gray suit that always made me feel armored. By the time I emerged, Elio had gone downstairs. I could hear him moving around in the kitchen, the familiar sounds of coffee brewing and cupboards opening. For a brief moment, the domesticity of it struck me as surreal, how quickly the foundations of a marriage could crumble while the routines remained intact. I found him at the kitchen island. 2 cups of coffee prepared mine with a splash of cream, just as I liked it. A peace offering, or perhaps just muscle memory after 8 years. I've asked Arthur Walsh to represent me, he said without preamble. We have a meeting scheduled with your attorney this afternoon. I know, I replied, picking up my coffee. Cleo informed me yesterday. He blinked, thrown off balance again. You've already spoken with her. Of course, I said mildly. Did you think I'd wait for you to make the first move? Frustration flickered across his face. This wasn't going according to his plan. Candace, I'm trying to make this as painless as possible. There's no need for us to become adversaries. I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. You had an affair with your secretary, got her pregnant, and now you want my house. I think we became adversaries the moment you decided to betray our marriage. He had the grace to look uncomfortable. At least, it wasn't planned. It just happened. Affairs rarely are planned, I said, setting down my coffee cup. But the decisions that follow are. And you've made yours. I picked up my briefcase and headed for the door. I'll see you at the meeting. 2 o'clock at Cleo's office. Wait, he called after me. What about the house? Can we at least discuss that civilly? I turned back, meeting his eyes steadily. The house is not negotiable. Elio, I suggest you and Genevieve explore other options. The flash of anger in his eyes told me everything I needed to know about his intentions. This wouldn't be amicable, no matter what he claimed. He'd fight for the house, or rather, for its value and what it represented. The battle lines were drawn. Good. I preferred honest opposition to false civility. Naomi was waiting for me at the coffee shop across from my office building, her laptop open on the table between us. At 48, with silver-streaked dark hair and the watchful eyes of someone who'd spent decades observing human behavior, she carried herself with the quiet confidence of a woman who knew exactly how dangerous she could be. Morning, counselor, she said as I slid into the seat across from her. Sleep well as could be expected, I replied, setting down my coffee. What did you find? She turned her laptop toward me. Genevieve Parker, 30, executive assistant at Morgan Financial for 3 years. Before that, she worked at 2 other investment firms in similar roles. Pattern of employment suggests she prefers working with male executives in the 40-plus age range. I nodded, unsurprised. And December. That's where it gets interesting. Naomi pulled up a series of photos showing Genevieve entering a high-end apartment building, timestamp showing December 12th during Elio's supposed conference. This is the residence of Caleb Richardson, 35, personal trainer at Elevation Fitness. She visited his apartment 8 times in December, including the week of the 10th through the 16th, your conception window. I studied the photos, noting the way Genevieve's body language changed in Richardson's presence, more relaxed, more genuine than how she carried herself around Elio. They were involved, I stated. Definitely, Naomi confirmed. And based on my surveillance, the relationship continued at least through February, overlapping with her involvement with your husband. I raised an eyebrow. She was seeing them both simultaneously. Appears so. I have text messages from her phone to Richardson as recently as 3 weeks ago. She pulled up screenshots showing intimate exchanges that left little doubt about the nature of their relationship. Does he know about the pregnancy? Naomi hesitated. That's unclear. In their recent exchanges, she mentions needing to talk about something important, but then cancels the meeting. My guess is she hasn't told him yet. Or, if she has, she hasn't disclosed who she's claiming is the father. I processed this information, the strategic part of my mind already calculating how to use it. We need to contact Richardson, carefully. If the baby might be his, he deserves to know, and he could be a valuable ally. Already located him, Naomi said, sliding a business card across the table. He works at the Elevation Fitness on Wilshire, independent contractor, so no company to worry about with confidentiality issues. I pocketed the card. Good work. Keep digging into both of them. I want to know everything: financial history, past relationships, any potential leverage points. Naomi nodded, then hesitated. There's one more thing you should know. In my background check on Genevieve, I found something odd. She was briefly married 5 years ago to a James Harmon. The marriage lasted less than a year, but during divorce proceedings, there was a restraining order filed against her. This caught my attention. On what grounds? Harassment and threats. According to the court documents, after Harmon filed for divorce, she threatened to destroy his career if he didn't give her a substantial settlement. She allegedly hacked his email, sent damaging messages to his colleagues, and showed up at his workplace causing scenes. Interesting, I said, filing this information away. Was she successful? Partially. He settled for more than his attorney recommended, just to make her go away. The restraining order was part of the agreement. She got more money. He got legal protection. I felt a cold certainty settle over me. She's done this before, targeted successful men, manipulated situations to her advantage. Looks that way, Naomi agreed. And Elio is wealthier than Harmon was, with more to lose reputation-wise. I checked my watch. The meeting with Walsh and Elio was in 3 hours. Send me everything you have on the Harmon divorce. I want Cleo to review it before we meet with Walsh. Already done, Naomi said, closing her laptop. It's in your inbox. I stood, gathering my things. You're worth every penny, Naomi. She smiled, a rare expression on her usually stoic face. Just doing my job. And if I may say so, it's satisfying to help someone who's thinking 10 steps ahead instead of just reacting emotionally. Speaking of thinking ahead, I said, I need you to do one more thing. Find out if Caleb Richardson would be willing to meet with me. Privately, discreetly. I'll arrange it, she promised. What angle do you want to take? I considered this carefully. No angles, just the truth. If there's a chance he's the father of that baby, he deserves to know what's happening, and I deserve to know if Genevieve is manipulating Elio the same way she did Harmon. As I walked to my office, I felt a strange calm settling over me. The pieces were falling into place, the strategy taking shape. This wouldn't just be about surviving the divorce. It would be about reclaiming what was mine and exposing the truth behind Elio and Genevieve's convenient alliance. Cleo's office occupied the 15th floor of a sleek downtown building, the conference room offering panoramic views of the city. I arrived early, as planned, to review our strategy one final time before Elio and Walsh appeared. The Harmon divorce files are enlightening, Cleo said, spreading documents across the polished table. Genevieve Parker has a pattern of behavior that any judge would find concerning. We can use this if they push too hard. I nodded, scanning the restraining order details. Hold it in reserve. I want to see what approach Walsh takes first. And Richardson Naomi mentioned you wanted to contact him. She's arranging a meeting, if he confirms a relationship during the conception window. It gives us leverage for the paternity test and undermines their united front. I straightened a stack of papers, my mind already gaming out various scenarios. How do you want to handle the Archer Holdings revelation? Not yet, Cleo advised. That's our ace. Let's see what they put on the table first. Walsh will try to intimidate with threats about community property, but he doesn't know about the LLC yet. The conference room door opened, and Cleo's assistant appeared. Mr. Walsh and Mr. Torrance have arrived. Show them in, Cleo said, then turned to me. Ready. I smoothed my expression into professional neutrality. Always? Arthur Walsh entered first. Every inch the high-powered divorce attorney in his tailored suit and carefully maintained silver hair. He carried himself with the confidence of a man accustomed to winning, to intimidating opponents into submission. Behind him came Elio, looking slightly uncomfortable in the unfamiliar setting of someone else's legal domain. Ms. Archer, Ms. Montgomery. Walsh greeted us with practiced cordiality. Thank you for accommodating our request for this preliminary meeting. Of course, Cleo replied smoothly. We're all interested in an efficient resolution. Walsh took his seat across from us, arranging his files with methodical precision. Indeed, I believe we can avoid unnecessary acrimony if we approach this matter sensibly. He gave me a practiced, sympathetic look. Divorce is difficult enough without adding emotional complications. I met his gaze evenly. I couldn't agree more, Mr. Walsh, which is why I hope we can focus on practical matters rather than emotional manipulation. A flicker of surprise crossed his face before he masked it. Beside him, Elio shifted in his seat. Excellent, Walsh continued, recovering smoothly. Then let's discuss the primary matter's asset division, the marital home, and of course, Mr. Torrance's impending paternity. Before we proceed, Cleo interjected, we'd like to establish some basic facts. Mr. Torrance has acknowledged his relationship with Ms. Parker and her pregnancy. However, given the timing and circumstances, my client is requesting a paternity test before any discussions regarding child support or related matters. Walsh's expression hardened slightly. My client has acknowledged paternity. A test seems unnecessary and potentially offensive. Nevertheless, I said calmly, given the significant assets involved and the timing of Ms. Parker's pregnancy, verification is prudent. I'm sure if Mr. Torrance is confident in his paternity, he won't object to scientific confirmation. Elio cleared his throat. I've already agreed to the test. Let's move on. Walsh gave him a sharp look that I didn't miss. Interesting. They weren't as aligned as they appeared. Very well, Walsh conceded. Now, regarding the marital home. The beach house is not on the table, I stated firmly. Walsh's smile turned condescending. Ms. Archer, with all due respect, California is a community property state. Assets acquired during the marriage are subject to equal division, regardless of whose name appears on the deed. I'm quite familiar with California family law, Mr. Walsh, I replied coolly. However, the beach house situation is more complex than a standard marital asset. Complex or not, he countered, my client has a right to his share of all marital property. Given Ms. Parker's pregnancy and their need for suitable housing, we propose that Mr. Torrance receive the house in exchange for a more favorable division of other assets. I allowed myself a small smile. I'm afraid that won't be possible. Walsh leaned forward, his demeanor shifting from cordial to intimidating. Ms. Archer, I advise you to consider this offer seriously. The courts tend to view attempts to shield marital assets unfavorably, and I assure you, we will thoroughly investigate any such attempts. Investigation is certainly your prerogative, Cleo interjected smoothly. In the meantime, we have prepared a preliminary settlement offer for your consideration. She slid a folder across the table. This represents a fair division of all legitimate marital assets, excluding the beach house, for reasons we can discuss in more detail if necessary. Walsh's eyes narrowed as he took the folder, but didn't open it. I should caution you both that if we cannot reach a reasonable agreement regarding the house, we'll have no choice but to pursue more aggressive discovery measures. By all means, I said, maintaining my composure. In fact, we welcome thorough discovery. It will only strengthen our position. Elio, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke up. Candace, be reasonable. You know how much that house means to us. We built a life there. I met his gaze directly. A life you chose to discard when you began your affair. The house remains off the table. Elio. Walsh placed a restraining hand on Elio's arm as he started to respond. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. We'll review your offer and respond formally. He stood, signaling the end of the meeting. However, I must emphasize that my client is prepared to litigate fully if necessary. As are we, Cleo assured him, rising as well. As they gathered their things to leave, I remained seated, maintaining my calm exterior while watching Elio closely. His body language betrayed his frustration, his uncertainty. He hadn't expected me to be so composed, so unmovable. At the door, he paused, looking back at me. This isn't you, Candace, this cold, calculating approach. This isn't who you are. I met his gaze steadily. You never really knew who I was, Elio. That was the problem all along. After they left, Cleo turned to me with a raised eyebrow. That went exactly as expected. Walsh is planning to bully and intimidate, while Elio is counting on emotional manipulation. Neither will work, I said, gathering my files. But we need to move quickly now. Walsh will start aggressive discovery, hoping to find leverage. He won't find anything he can use, Cleo assured me. Archer Holdings was established properly, with all the necessary documentation and corporate formalities. Your brother has been meticulous as trustee. I nodded, but my mind was already moving ahead. Schedule the paternity test as soon as possible, and I need that meeting with Richardson. Already arranged, came Naomi's voice from the doorway. I looked up to see her leaning against the frame, a satisfied expression on her face. Tomorrow, 9 a.m., at the coffee shop on 4th. He was interested when I mentioned Genevieve's pregnancy. Good, I said, a piece of the puzzle falling into place. Very good. Caleb Richardson was not what I expected, based on the surveillance photos. I'd pictured a typical personal trainer, all muscles and swagger. The man sitting across from me at the quiet corner table was certainly fit, but he carried himself with a quieter confidence, intelligent eyes assessing me as I introduced myself. Thank you for meeting with me, I said, after the barista had delivered our coffees. I appreciate your discretion. Your investigator was persuasive, he replied, his deep voice carefully neutral. Said it concerned Genevieve and a pregnancy. That got my attention. I nodded, studying him. How long have you known Genevieve? About 7 months, he answered. We met at the gym where I work. She hired me as her trainer, but it evolved from there. Were you seeing her in December? His jaw tightened slightly. Yes, almost daily during the week of the 10th. She said her boss was out of town at a conference, so she had more free time. He leaned forward. Is she pregnant? Yes, I confirmed. 4 months along, due August 15th. He sat back, processing this information, then met my gaze directly. And you're the wife of this boss she's been seeing. I'm Elio Torrance's wife, yes, though we're now in divorce proceedings. Because of Genevieve, he concluded. Partly, I acknowledged, though the marriage had issues long before she entered the picture. What concerns me now is that Elio believes he's the father of her baby, and they're using this to make certain claims in our divorce. Richardson's expression darkened. She told me she ended things with him in January, that it was just a brief affair that meant nothing. He shook his head. I should have known better. The expensive gifts, the vagueness about her schedule. When did you last see her? I asked. 3 weeks ago. She's been canceling our sessions, making excuses. His hands tightened around his coffee cup. Said she needed to talk to me about something important, but then never showed for the meeting. Mr. Richardson. Caleb, he corrected. Caleb, I amended. Given the timing of the pregnancy and your relationship with Genevieve, there's a possibility you could be the father of her child. He nodded slowly. I've done the math since your investigator contacted me. The timing fits. His eyes met mine, direct and clear. What are you looking for from me, Mrs. Torrance? Candace, I offered. And I'm looking for the truth. If there's a chance you're the father, you deserve to know. And if Genevieve is manipulating my husband the way she appears to be, that's relevant to our divorce proceedings. You want me to take a paternity test, he stated. Eventually, yes. But right now, I'm more interested in understanding the nature of your relationship with Genevieve, particularly during December. I hesitated, then decided on complete honesty. She has a history of targeting successful men and manipulating situations to her financial advantage. My husband is wealthy, with a significant reputation to protect. Caleb's expression hardened. And I'm just a personal trainer, so I have less to offer. That's not what I meant, I clarified. But it might explain her motivations if she is indeed trying to pass off your child as Elio's. He was quiet for a moment, considering. I have texts, he finally said. Photos, evidence of our relationship during that time. She stayed at my apartment the entire week her boss, your husband, was supposedly at a conference. Would you be willing to share that evidence? I asked carefully. What happens if the baby is mine? He countered. That would be between you and Genevieve. I said, honestly, my interest is in establishing the truth before my divorce proceeds further. If Elio is not the father, That changes the dynamics considerably. Caleb studied me, then nodded slowly. I'll share what I have, and I want that paternity test. If there's a chance that's my child, I need to know. Thank you, I said, feeling a piece of the puzzle click into place. My investigator will contact you about safely transferring the evidence. As we finished our coffee, I found myself genuinely liking Caleb Richardson. There was an authenticity to him that stood in stark contrast to Elio's calculated charm or Genevieve's manipulative smiles. Can I ask you something? He said as we prepared to leave. Of course. Why aren't you angry if my partner had betrayed me like this? I'd be furious. I considered his question carefully. I am angry, I admitted. But anger clouds judgment, and right now, I need perfect clarity. There will be time for anger later, when this is resolved. He nodded, seeming to understand. Well, for what it's worth, your husband is a fool. And Genevieve, he shook his head. I thought I knew her. We rarely truly know the people closest to us, I said, thinking of Elio and the 8 years I'd spent with a man who had ultimately been a stranger. That's the hardest lesson of all. The paternity test was scheduled for the following week, a simple cheek swab for Elio that would be compared to the baby's DNA after birth. What Elio didn't know was that we had also arranged for Caleb's DNA to be tested, a comparison that wouldn't be revealed unless necessary. In the meantime, Naomi had completed her investigation into Genevieve's past, uncovering a pattern more calculated than I had initially suspected. The Harmon divorce was just one example in a series of relationships with successful men that had ended with Genevieve receiving significant financial settlements. She's meticulous, Naomi explained, spreading photos across my dining room table. She targets men in specific demographics: successful, established, often married. She positions herself in their professional orbit, then creates opportunities for private interaction. I studied the evidence of Genevieve's past relationships: photos, financial records, court documents, and Elio was the perfect target. Prime candidate, Naomi agreed. Wealthy investment director, prominent in financial circles, married to a successful attorney who travels frequently for cases. Plus, his ego has always been his vulnerability. That stung, though I knew it was true. Elio's need for admiration, for validation, had been evident from the start of our relationship. I'd found it charming at first, his desire to impress me, to be seen as exceptional. Only later did I recognize it as the insecurity it truly was. The difference this time is the pregnancy, Naomi continued. She's escalating her strategy. A child creates a permanent connection, ensures ongoing support. Unless the child isn't Elio's, I pointed out. Exactly. Naomi pulled out her phone, showing me a text from Caleb. Richardson has provided everything: texts, photos, even security footage from his apartment building showing Genevieve's comings and goings during the conception window. It's compelling evidence of their relationship. I nodded, a plan forming. We don't reveal this yet. Let Elio take the paternity test first, maintain the pressure. Meanwhile, we prepare to introduce Richardson and his evidence if Walsh continues pushing for the house. My phone rang Cleo's number. Speaking of Walsh, I murmured, answering the call. Walsh just filed for emergency discovery regarding Archer Holdings. Cleo said without preamble. He's claiming you created the LLC specifically to shield marital assets from the divorce. As expected, I replied calmly. We have all the documentation showing it was established 14 months ago as a legitimate asset protection vehicle, long before any marital issues surfaced publicly. He's requesting a hearing before Judge Winters next week. Wants to depose you, Vince, and the accountant who helped establish the LLC. I considered this, calculating the timing. Good. Winters is fair, detail-oriented. He'll recognize legitimate asset protection when he sees it. Schedule the depositions. I want this resolved before the paternity test results come back. After ending the call, I turned back to Naomi. Walsh is making his move on Archer Holdings. We need to accelerate our timeline. She nodded, already gathering the documents. What's the next step? We increased the pressure on Genevieve. I decided. Anonymous delivery of selected photos showing her with Richardson during the conception window, enough to create doubt. Not enough to show our full hand? Creating friction between them, Naomi observed. Exactly. United. They're stronger. Divided. They'll make mistakes. I checked my watch. How quickly can you arrange the delivery? Tonight, she promised. Professional. Untraceable. I know people who specialize in this kind of thing. I nodded, satisfied. Perfect. By morning. The united front they presented in our meeting will show significant cracks, and that's exactly what we need for the next phase. As Naomi left to arrange the delivery, I moved to the great room windows overlooking the ocean. The sun was setting, painting the water in shades of gold and crimson. This house perched on the cliffs with its panoramic views and the constant sound of waves had been my sanctuary, my true home in a marriage that had increasingly felt like a performance. I would not lose it, not to Elio's betrayal, not to Genevieve's manipulation, not to Arthur Walsh's legal maneuvering. I had prepared too thoroughly, planned too carefully. The beach house would remain where it belonged with me, standing firm on the cliff, just as I intended to remain. Tomorrow would bring the next phase of my strategy. The paternity test demand was already creating friction between Elio and Genevieve. I'd seen it in their body language during the meeting. Naomi was completing her investigation into Genevieve's other relationship, and Cleo was preparing the legal maneuvers that would gradually tighten the vice. But tonight, I allowed myself this moment of reflection, watching the sun sink into the Pacific, 8 years of marriage ending not with tears or recriminations, but with strategy and calculation. It wasn't the end I'd imagined when I'd said my vows, but it was the end I would control. The clinic waiting room was antiseptic and impersonal, like most medical facilities. Elio sat across from me, thumbing through emails on his phone, occasionally glancing up with poorly concealed irritation. We had barely spoken since arriving, the silence between us heavy with unspoken accusations. Mr. Torrance. The technician appeared in the doorway, clipboard in hand. "We're ready for you." Elio stood, straightening his tie in a reflexive gesture. "How long will this take?" "Just a few minutes for the collection," she assured him, "and the results will be provided simultaneously to both parties and their legal representatives." As the technician prepared the collection kit, I noticed Elio checking his phone again, his frown deepening. I wondered if he was texting Genevieve, if she was panicking about this test and what it might reveal. The collection itself took less than a minute, a quick swab inside Elio's cheek, sealed in a tamper-evident container, labeled and documented. Throughout the procedure, he maintained the distant professionalism that had been his shield since our confrontation at the restaurant. "That's it," the technician said, labeling the final container. "Results should be available in about a week." Elio nodded curtly, already turning toward the door. "Is there anything else required from me?" "No, you're free to go," she confirmed. In the parking lot, Elio paused beside his car, finally looking directly at me. Was this really necessary? Candace, the paternity test, the formal setting, the legal observers? Yes, I said simply. It was. His jaw tightened. "You know, when I first told you about Genevieve, I thought we could handle this like adults, reach a reasonable agreement without turning it into warfare." "Is that what you expected?" I asked, keeping my voice even. "That I would just hand over the house and walk away because you got your secretary pregnant?" "I expected you to be reasonable," he countered. "To recognize that situations change, relationships evolve. Spare me the euphemisms. Elio," I interrupted, "you didn't evolve. You cheated. You betrayed our marriage and now want to be rewarded for it." He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident. "That's not fair. I'm trying to do the right thing for Genevieve and the baby." "The right thing?" I repeated, feeling a cold anger rise. "Like making sure the child is actually yours before you dismantle our life together." His expression shifted, something uncertain flashing in his eyes. "What are you implying?" "Nothing," I said, taking a step back. "Just that the offer I gave you to consider expires tomorrow. I suggest you think carefully about your position." Without waiting for his response, I turned and walked to my car, feeling his eyes on me the entire way. As I drove away, I caught a glimpse of him in my rearview mirror, standing motionless in the parking lot, phone pressed to his ear. Phase 1 complete. At my office, Cleo was waiting with Naomi. Both women were reviewing documents spread across my conference table, expressions intent. "How did it go?" Cleo asked as I set down my briefcase. "As expected," I replied. "Elio is projecting confidence, but there's doubt creeping in." "Naomi, did your contact make the delivery to Elio last night?" She nodded. "Select photos showing Genevieve entering Richardson's apartment building during the conception window. Nothing explicit, just enough to raise questions." And, I prompted, "He received the package at his office around 7 p.m. According to my source, he left immediately after opening it, looking agitated." She checked her phone. "He made multiple calls to Genevieve on his way home, most going unanswered." "Good," I said, slipping off my jacket. "And Richardson, ready whenever we need him." Naomi confirmed, though I'm concerned about approaching him directly at this stage. If Genevieve learns we've been in contact with him, we risk losing a valuable card in our hand. I considered this. We don't approach him yet, but we make sure Elio learns about him before the settlement deadline tomorrow. An anonymous delivery of selected photos should accomplish that. Cleo nodded approvingly. Creating friction between them gives us leverage. If they're united, they're stronger. Divided, they'll make mistakes. What about Archer Holdings? Naomi asked. When do you reveal that particular bombshell? Not yet, I replied. The paternity issue needs to play out first. Walsh's request for emergency discovery is our immediate concern. I want all documentation for the LLC prepared for the hearing next week. Vince is flying in tomorrow to review everything as trustee. As we continued strategizing, my phone buzzed with a text from Elio. We need to talk. Tonight. I showed the message to the others. Sooner than expected. The photos must have hit harder than we anticipated. How do you want to play it? Cleo asked. I typed a response, 9 p.m. I'll be home. Calm, professional, revealing nothing. I decided. Let him come to me with whatever revelation or negotiation he's planning. Whatever revelation or negotiation he was planning would have to wait until he'd had time to absorb the first piece of evidence against Genevieve. By morning, the united front they presented in our meeting would likely show significant cracks, and that was exactly what I needed for my next move. The beach house was silent when I returned home that night, filled only with the distant rhythm of waves against the cliffs and the occasional cry of a night bird. I kicked off my heels at the door, padding barefoot through the great room toward the kitchen. Despite the tension of the impending confrontation with Elio, being home always centered me. This house had been my project, my sanctuary. I'd found it 5 years ago, a stunning property in need of significant renovation. Elio had been hesitant about the investment, but I'd seen its potential immediately. Using money from my inheritance after Dad died, I'd purchased it primarily in my name. Though Elio had contributed to the renovations, every corner reflected my vision, the expansive windows showcasing the ocean view, the open kitchen with its soapstone counters, the library with built-in shelves covering an entire wall. It wasn't just a house, it was an extension of myself in a way our previous homes had never been. I poured a glass of wine and moved to my home office, a space Elio rarely entered. Here, the personal touches were even more evident: books with broken spines piled on side tables, legal pads filled with notes, family photos, including one of Dad and me at my law school graduation, his proud smile now a treasured memory. I settled at my desk and opened my laptop, pulling up the secure folder where I kept my divorce strategy documents. The settlement offer I presented was calculated to seem reasonable, while protecting what mattered most: the house and my controlling interest in Archer Holdings. Elio didn't yet know about the LLC. Walsh hadn't discovered it in his preliminary asset search, focusing instead on properties directly titled in our names. When the revelation came, it would change the entire dynamic of the negotiations. My phone buzzed with a voicemail notification. Elio again. Candace, I'm running late. Meeting with Walsh went longer than expected. Still need to talk tonight, though. Important. I'll be there by 9:30. His voice sounded strained, uncertain, not the confident, controlling tone I was accustomed to. The evidence was working on him, creating exactly the kind of doubt and pressure I'd intended. I didn't call back. Instead, I sent a brief text. As I said, 9 p.m. We can discuss everything tomorrow. Then, setting the phone aside, I returned to my preparation. Tomorrow's conversation would require perfect balance, enough pressure to leverage his new doubts about Genevieve, without revealing how much I already knew or what evidence I still held in reserve. At precisely 9:30, I heard Elio's key in the door. I remained in my office, waiting. Let him come to me, seek me out. Another small power shift in the careful dance we were engaged in. His footsteps moved through the house, pausing in the kitchen, then continuing toward my office. When he appeared in the doorway, I was struck by how disheveled he looked, tie loosened, hair slightly mussed, as if he'd repeatedly run his hands through it. Elio never looked disheveled. He changed clothes before an important meeting, looked impeccable even in crisis. Is it true? He asked without preamble. About Genevieve and this trainer. I set my wine glass down on the desk and regarded him steadily. You tell me. Don't play games. Candace? His voice rose slightly. Did you have her followed? I had several matters investigated as part of my due diligence. I replied calmly. What exactly did you receive? He ran a hand through his hair, another uncharacteristic gesture for the typically composed Elio. Photos. Genevieve entering some apartment building in December, the same week I was in San Diego. He paced the small space in front of my desk. She claims it's her sister I saw, that they look alike. And do you believe her? He stopped pacing, meeting my gaze directly. I don't know what to believe anymore. First, the paternity test demand. Now, these photos. He shook his head. What else haven't you told me? I could ask you the same question, I countered. What else haven't you told me about your relationship with Genevieve? He dropped into the chair across from my desk, suddenly looking exhausted. It wasn't supposed to happen this way. The affair was a mistake. But when she told me about the baby, he trailed off, then looked up at me. I felt responsible, obligated to do the right thing, even if that meant taking my house. Our house, he corrected automatically. My house, I insisted quietly. Purchased primarily with my inheritance, renovated to my specifications, titled predominantly in my name. Community property, he began, is a complex area of law. I finished for him. Particularly when inheritance funds and asset protection measures are involved. His eyes narrowed. What measures? I maintained my neutral expression. Prudent measures to protect myself? Any good attorney would do the same. What else? His voice was quiet now, almost resigned. What else have you been preparing that I don't know about? This was the opening I'd been waiting for, the moment to reveal just enough of my hidden advantage to shift the power dynamics decisively without showing my full hand. Archer Holdings, I said simply, his brow furrowed in momentary confusion, then cleared as recognition dawned. The LLC that owns this house, I nodded. Established 14 months ago as a legitimate asset protection vehicle, the house was transferred to the LLC, with my brother serving as trustee. Completely legal, completely transparent, and completely protected from divorce proceedings. The color drained from his face as he processed this information. You've been planning this for over a year before any of this with Genevieve. I've been protecting my assets, I corrected, which proved to be a wise decision, given current circumstances. He stood abruptly, anger replacing shock. This is why Walsh couldn't find the property in the asset searches. You deliberately concealed it. I legally protected it, I countered, and all documentation was properly filed. It's not my fault if your attorney didn't conduct a thorough enough search. He'll challenge it, Elio threatened. Corporate veils are pierced in divorce cases all the time. He can try, I acknowledged. But the LLC was established well before any marital issues surfaced publicly. All corporate formalities have been meticulously maintained, and my brother is a professional trustee with impeccable credentials. Judge Winters isn't likely to be sympathetic to claims of fraudulent conveyance. Elio stared at me, truly seeing me perhaps for the first time in our marriage, not as the supportive wife, the successful attorney who nevertheless deferred to his financial expertise, but as an equal, a formidable opponent. What do you want? He finally asked, his voice flat. Exactly what my settlement offer outlined, I replied. A fair division of our legitimate marital assets, ownership of the intellectual property related to my legal practice, and control of my separate investments, plus a cash payment that would allow you to purchase a very nice home elsewhere. I stood, picking up my wine glass. The choice is simple, Elio. Accept my offer and move forward with your life with or without Genevieve, depending on what the paternity test reveals, or fight me in court, where I'll be forced to present evidence that would likely damage your professional reputation considerably more than a simple divorce. Evidence? He echoed, wariness creeping into his voice. Let's just say that Genevieve's past relationships and financial settlements make for interesting reading, I said mildly, as do certain irregularities in client billing at your firm that my financial audit uncovered. That last part was a calculated risk. I had indeed discovered questionable billing practices during my investigation, but hadn't yet decided whether to use that information. The shock on Elio's face told me the gamble had paid off. There were irregularities, and he knew exactly what I was referring to. You wouldn't, he said, but without conviction. I'd prefer not to, I said honestly, but I will protect what's mine. Elio, make no mistake about that. He stood there for a long moment, staring at me as if trying to reconcile the woman before him with the wife he thought he knew. Finally, he turned toward the door. I need to think, he said, his voice unsteady. And talk to Walsh? Of course, I replied calmly. My offer stands until noon tomorrow. After that, we proceed to full litigation. As his footsteps receded down the hallway, I heard the front door open and close. Through the window, I watched his car pull away, headlights sweeping across the darkened landscape. The first major confrontation was over, and I had maintained control throughout, revealed enough to shake Elio's confidence without showing my full hand, created doubt about Genevieve while introducing the Archer Holdings complication. Now I just had to wait and see which path he chose, negotiation or war. The next morning, I was already at my office when Cleo called. Walsh just reached out, she said without preamble. He's requesting an emergency meeting at his office at 11. Just principals, no associates. I checked my watch, 9:15. Did he indicate what prompted this sudden urgency? No, but I'd guess your conversation with Elio last night hit its mark. There was a pause. Then, are we accepting? Absolutely, I replied. This is exactly what we wanted them reacting to us, not the other way around. Call Walsh's office and confirm. After ending the call, I texted Naomi meeting with Walsh at 11. Need update on Genevieve's movement since photo delivery. Her response came quickly. Multiple calls between E and G yesterday evening, followed by in-person meeting at her apartment around 10 p.m. E left looking agitated after 45 minutes. G made call to unknown number immediately after his departure. Spoke for 23 minutes. Interesting. The confrontation I'd anticipated had indeed occurred, followed by Genevieve reaching out to someone else, possibly Richardson, possibly another ally. Either way, fractures were forming in their alliance. My next call was to Vince, who had arrived in town late the previous night. As Archer Holdings trustee, his presence at any serious negotiation was essential. "Morning, fighter," he greeted me, using the nickname he'd given me when we were kids, the scrappy little sister who never backed down from neighborhood bullies or academic challenges. "How soon can you be at Walsh's office?" I asked, skipping pleasantries. "For what emergency meeting?" They're rattled, moving faster than expected. I heard him chuckle. The Archer Holdings revelation landed. Knew that would shake them. "I can be ready in 30 minutes. Want to meet for coffee before? Strategize." "Perfect. The usual place, 10:15. As I gathered my materials for the meeting, I reflected on how differently this was playing out from what Elio had likely anticipated. He had expected me to crumble, to be so devastated by his betrayal that I would accept whatever terms he offered just to end the pain. Instead, he was discovering what I had known from the beginning, that in a battle of strategy and patience, I would always have the advantage. My entire career had been built on meticulous preparation, on seeing 10 moves ahead while opponents focused on immediate gains. Elio had always admired this quality in my professional life, but somehow never imagined it would be applied to our marriage, perhaps the clearest evidence of how little he truly knew me. Vince was waiting at our favorite coffee shop, his tall frame folded into a corner booth, legal documents spread across the table. At 45, my brother had the relaxed confidence of someone who had found his perfect niche in life corporate trustee services for high net worth clients, a role that utilized both his financial acumen and his unflappable temperament. "You look surprisingly well for someone in the middle of a contentious divorce," he observed as I slid into the booth across from him. "I feel surprisingly well," I admitted. "There's something clarifying about finally dropping the pretense." He nodded, understanding immediately. "You've been preparing for this a lot longer than 14 months, haven't you? Not legally, maybe, but mentally?" I considered this as I sipped my coffee. "I think I've been preparing since the first time I realized Elio resented my success, that it threatened him somehow, which was when, about 3 years in, I replied. When I made partner before he made managing director, he said all the right things publicly, threw a party, made a toast about how proud he was, but privately, I shook my head, remembering. There was this coldness, this distance. He started scheduling client meetings when I had important events, forgetting anniversaries. "And you stayed," Vince observed, not accusatory, just stating a fact. "I stayed," I acknowledged. "Tried harder, worked at the marriage, told myself it was just a phase, the classic mistake. The beach house was your turning point," he said, gesturing to the Archer Holdings documents. "That's when you started actively protecting yourself." I nodded. "I wanted something that was mine, truly mine. And when Elio hesitated about buying it, tried to talk me out of it, I realized I needed to structure it carefully." "Well, the structure is rock solid," Vince assured me, tapping the legal papers. "Walsh can challenge all he wants, but Judge Winters knows me and my reputation. The LLC follows every corporate formality, maintains separate finances, files separate taxes. There's no commingling of assets, no using it as a personal piggy bank." "Good," I said, "because that's likely to be Walsh's primary attack vector today." Vince gathered the documents, arranging them in a precise order. "So, what's our strategy for this meeting?" "We listen," I decided. "Let Walsh make whatever offer prompted this emergency session. Give away nothing. If they're moving this quickly, it means Elio's doubts about Genevieve are growing, and they're trying to salvage what they can. And if they offer acceptable terms, we consider them," I said practically. "The goal isn't to punish Elio or even Genevieve, is to protect what's mine and exit this marriage with my financial and professional standing intact." Vince nodded, a hint of pride in his expression. "You always were the pragmatic one." "Unlike you, the dreamer," I teased, falling into our old familiar dynamic. He laughed, the tension breaking momentarily. "Hey, someone in the family had to be the idealist. Balance out all your strategic calculation." As we gathered our things to leave, Vince's expression turned more serious. "I have to ask, are you really okay? Not just handling it well, but actually okay?" I paused, considering the question honestly. "I'm getting there. The marriage has been over in all but name for a long time. This just makes it official." He never deserved you, Vince said quietly. Never had the capacity to appreciate someone like you. Someone like me. A force of nature who'd outshine him professionally and financially. His ego couldn't handle your success. I sipped my wine, considering this. When I first met Elio at a charity gala, I'd been a third-year associate with Promise. He'd been the charming investment director 7 years my senior, worldly and established, offering me entry into circles I'd only glimpsed from afar. I remembered our first date, a symphony followed by dinner at an exclusive restaurant where the maitre d' knew Elio by name. I'd been impressed by his confidence, his easy navigation of spaces that still felt new to me. You're right, I acknowledged. But I didn't see it then, or didn't want to. And now I see everything clearly, I replied, standing and gathering my briefcase, including exactly how this meeting is going to go. Arthur Walsh's office occupied the top floor of a downtown high-rise, all glass and chrome and intimidation. The reception area featured modern art pieces that had clearly been selected for their price tags rather than aesthetic value, another Walsh tactic, showcasing the wealth of his practice and, by extension, the expense of opposing him. The receptionist led us down a corridor lined with more abstract art to a massive conference room where Walsh himself stood at the head of a table, silver-haired and impeccably dressed. Elio sat to his right, tension evident in his posture. Ms. Archer, Mr. Archer. Walsh greeted us with professional courtesy. Thank you for accommodating this meeting on short notice. Of course, I replied smoothly, taking a seat across from Elio. Vince settled beside me, his relaxed demeanor a deliberate contrast to Elio's obvious discomfort. I'll get straight to the point, Walsh continued. After reviewing your settlement offer and conducting further discussions with my client, we're prepared to present a counter-proposal. He slid a folder across the table. The primary points are outlined there. I opened the folder, scanning the document inside while maintaining a neutral expression. The terms were better than I'd expected. Elio was conceding on several financial points, asking for reduced alimony considerations, and most significantly, dropping his claim to the beach house. In exchange, he wanted complete release from any potential claims related to his business practices and full ownership of the Morgan financial client relationships he developed during our marriage. I passed the document to Vince, who reviewed it with the careful attention of a trustee, accustomed to scrutinizing financial arrangements. This represents a significant shift from your initial position, I observed, looking directly at Elio, particularly regarding the house. Elio cleared his throat. After consideration, I've decided the house isn't worth the protracted legal battle that would result from challenging the LLC structure. A wise assessment, Vince commented mildly. Walsh shot him a look of mild irritation before continuing. However, this offer is contingent upon several factors. First, that all matters related to Archer Holdings be excluded from further negotiation or litigation. Second, that any information regarding Mr. Torrance's business practices remains strictly confidential. And third, that all matters be resolved before the paternity test results are received. That last condition confirmed my suspicions. Elio's doubts about Genevieve had grown to the point where he wanted the divorce settled before the paternity issue could complicate things further. What about Ms. Parker? I asked directly. How does she feel about this change in strategy? A flash of something anger, uncertainty crossed Elio's face. Genevieve is not involved in these negotiations. Interesting, I noted. Given that her pregnancy and your shared future in the beach house were central to your initial position, Walsh interjected smoothly. My client's relationship with Ms. Parker is separate from these divorce proceedings. We're focusing solely on the marital asset division today. I nodded thoughtfully, then looked to Vince, who gave a subtle incline of his head the terms were acceptable from a financial perspective. I'll need to discuss this with my attorney, I said. But preliminarily, the approach seems reasonable, with perhaps some minor adjustments to the intellectual property provisions. Of course, Walsh agreed, a hint of relief in his voice. He'd clearly expected more resistance. We can schedule a formal session with Ms. Montgomery to finalize details. One question, I said, turning to Elio. What prompted this sudden change in approach yesterday? You were adamant about the house. Elio met my gaze, and for a moment, I saw a glimpse of the man I'd once loved, direct, honest. Let's just say I've had reason to reconsider certain assumptions. About Genevieve, I stated, not a question. His jaw tightened. About many things. Walsh cleared his throat. Perhaps we should focus on the agreement rather than personal matters. The personal matters are relevant, I countered, particularly if they might impact the stability of this agreement. If Mr. Torrance's relationship with Ms. Parker is in flux. It could affect his financial position and thus his ability to honor these terms. My financial position is secure, Elio stated firmly. Regardless of any personal developments, I studied him for a moment, then nodded. Very well. I'll review these terms with Ms. Montgomery and respond formally by end of day tomorrow. As the meeting concluded and we prepared to leave, Elio surprised me by asking for a moment alone. Walsh looked displeased but exited the conference room with Vince, leaving us facing each other across the massive table. I underestimated you, Elio said quietly once the door closed. Always have, I suppose. Yes, I agreed simply. You did. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture that had become more frequent as his carefully constructed facade crumbled. The photos you sent, there were more. Weren't there more evidence about Genevieve? There's always more evidence. Elio, that's the first rule of investigation. And Richardson, is he involved in this? I kept my expression neutral. What makes you ask about Richardson specifically? Genevieve mentioned him when I confronted her about the photos. Said he was just her trainer, nothing more. His eyes met mine. But you know differently, don't you? I know many things, I replied carefully. Most importantly, I know that settling this divorce quickly and cleanly is in everyone's best interest, especially yours. He nodded slowly. The offer stands. I just want this over with. That can be arranged, I assured him, gathering my briefcase, assuming the terms are finalized as discussed. As I reached the door, he called after me. Candace, I turned, one hand on the doorknob. For what it's worth, he said, I am sorry, not just for Genevieve, but for not seeing you, really seeing you, all these years. I considered his words, the apparent sincerity behind them. Too little, too late, but perhaps genuine nonetheless. I believe you are sorry, Elio, I replied, but I'm not certain you understand what you're sorry for. And that, more than anything, is why this marriage is ending. He caved, Cleo stated flatly, reviewing the counteroffer in my office later that afternoon. Completely and unexpectedly caved on the house. That's surprising. Not really, I countered, pacing by the window. The photos of Genevieve with Richardson created exactly the doubt we anticipated. Plus, revealing Archer Holdings showed him I was 10 steps ahead. He's cutting his losses. And the rush to settle before the paternity results confirms our suspicion that he's questioning whether the baby is his, I explained. He wants the divorce finalized before that particular complication surfaces fully. Naomi, who had been quietly reviewing her notes in the corner, looked up. There's more happening with Genevieve than we know. After your meeting today, she made 3 calls to Richardson, all unanswered. Then she visited his apartment, but security didn't let her up. She left visibly upset. I nodded, pieces falling into place. Richardson is withdrawing from her, probably after learning about the pregnancy situation. That increases her desperation without Elio's support secured through the baby. She loses her leverage. So we accept the counteroffer, Cleo asked, with minor modifications to strengthen the confidentiality provisions and intellectual property rights. I decided, but essentially, yes, the core elements the house, financial terms are acceptable. What about Richardson? Naomi asked. Do we still need him to come forward formally? I considered this carefully. Not for the divorce. If Elio is settling, but for his own sake, and possibly for the child's, he should be aware of the paternity situation. Continue monitoring Genevieve's interactions with him, but we don't need to actively involve him in our proceedings now. As Naomi and Cleo left to prepare the formal response to Walsh's offer, I found myself alone in my office, experiencing an unexpected sense of anticlimax. For months, I've been preparing for a protracted legal battle, a test of wills and strategy against Elio and his team. Now, with victory essentially secured, I felt oddly hollow, not regret I had no second thoughts about ending the marriage or protecting what was mine. Perhaps it was simply the natural letdown after sustained vigilance, the emotional equivalent of muscles relaxing after prolonged tension. Or perhaps it was the realization that 8 years of my life had culminated not in the partnership I'd once envisioned, but in a sterile legal negotiation across a conference table, not with a man who truly knew me, but with a stranger who was only now beginning to glimpse who I really was. I poured myself a small whiskey and moved to the window, watching the city below. Tomorrow, the formal response would go to Walsh. Within a week, the papers would be signed. The beach house would remain mine, my financial independence secured. It was everything I'd strategized for. Everything I'd protected. So why did victory taste so incomplete? My phone buzzed with a text from Vince Nice work today. Fighter. Dinner to celebrate. I smiled at his unwavering support, the constancy that had been missing from my marriage. Not tonight. Rain check needs some solitude to process. Understood, came his immediate reply. Call if you need anything. Proud of you. Those simple words, proud of you, brought an unexpected tightness to my throat. They echoed what Dad would have said, his belief in my strength, my resilience. The man who taught me to stand my ground, to protect what mattered, would indeed have been proud of how I'd handled this situation. With that thought providing a measure of comfort, I turned back to my desk to begin the final review of our response to Walsh's offer. The end was in sight, and whatever emotions accompanied it, I would face them with the same clear-eyed pragmatism that had guided me this far. The next morning, a hand-delivered envelope arrived at my office, Elio's formal acceptance of our counter-proposal with the minor modifications I'd requested. Walsh had added a brief note indicating they were eager to finalize all documents before the end of the week. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. So why did I feel a persistent unease? As if something remained unresolved, I was considering this question when my phone rang, an unknown number. Normally, I would let such calls go to voicemail, but something prompted me to answer. Candace Archer speaking. Ms. Archer, this is Caleb Richardson. His deep voice was recognizable immediately. I hope I'm not interrupting anything important. Not at all. Mr. Richardson, what can I do for you? There was a brief pause. I need to speak with you, in person, if possible. It's about Genevieve and the baby. A prickle of alertness ran through me. Has something happened? You could say that. His tone was grim. She came to see me yesterday, admitted the baby might be mine, but said Elio Torrance was offering financial support she couldn't afford to lose, asked me to stay quiet until after your divorce was settled. This was unexpected, Genevieve acknowledging the paternity question voluntarily. And what did you tell her? That I needed time to think, he replied. But the truth is, if that's my child, I want to be involved, not just financially, but as a father. I can't just pretend it doesn't exist because it's convenient for her arrangement with your husband. I nodded, though he couldn't see me. I understand. When would you like to meet? As soon as possible. Today, if you can manage it. I can be free at 1, I offered. The same coffee shop as before. Perfect, he agreed. And Ms. Archer, thank you for being straightforward with me from the beginning. It's rare in this situation. After ending the call, I sat back in my chair, considering the implications. Genevieve was scrambling, trying to secure her position as she sensed Elio's support wavering. But in doing so, she'd inadvertently created another complication, a potential father who wanted involvement, not silence. I reached for my phone to call Cleo, then stopped. This development, while significant, didn't necessarily change our legal strategy. With Elio already agreeing to our terms, the paternity question was becoming secondary to the divorce proceedings themselves. But ethically, morally, that was a different matter. If Richardson was the father, he deserved the opportunity to be part of his child's life. And the child deserved to know its true parentage, not grow up in a web of convenient lies. This wasn't just about winning the divorce anymore. It was about ensuring that whatever came next was built on truth, not manipulation. Caleb Richardson was already waiting when I arrived at the coffee shop, his athletic frame tense with nervous energy. He stood as I approached, offering a firm handshake. Thank you for meeting me, he said as we settled at a corner table. Of course, I replied. Your call sounded urgent, he nodded, glancing around before leaning forward. Genevieve is panicking, said Elio is having doubts about the baby, about their relationship, that he's moving to settle the divorce quickly. That's accurate, I confirmed. We've reached tentative agreement on terms. The papers should be finalized within days. And the paternity test. Still pending. Results won't be available for another week, but the divorce will likely be concluded before then. Caleb's expression hardened. So he's cutting her loose, walking away from what he thought was his child. I can't speak to Elio's personal plans regarding Genevieve, I said carefully, only to the divorce proceedings themselves. Well, I can tell you what she's planning, he said grimly. She admitted she's been seeing other men while involved with both me and Elio. Said she's not even sure who the father is. But Elio was the best bet financially. Now that he's pulling back, she's scrambling. This was new information, multiple potential fathers, beyond just Elio and Caleb. The situation was even more complicated than I'd realized. What are you considering? I asked directly. I want a paternity test, he stated firmly. My own, not through your divorce proceedings. If the baby is mine, I want legal recognition as the father, with all the rights and responsibilities that entails. I nodded, respecting his directness. That's your right. Have you told Genevieve this? Not explicitly, he admitted. When she came to see me, she was focused on keeping me quiet until after your divorce was settled. Said Elio was offering a generous child support arrangement, and she didn't want to jeopardize that. And now I'm done being manipulated, he said with quiet conviction. I've consulted a family law attorney of my own. If the baby is mine, I'll pursue joint custody. I have a stable income, a good reputation, and no intentions of using a child as a bargaining chip. I studied him, impressed by his determination. May I ask why you're telling me this? Our divorce is proceeding regardless of the paternity question. He met my gaze steadily. Because you were honest with me when you didn't have to be. You could have just used me as leverage against your husband without caring about the actual truth. But you didn't. You gave me information I had a right to know. It was the right thing to do, I said simply. Exactly, he agreed. And this is the right thing for me to do. I wanted you to know my intentions because whatever happens with the paternity, we're all connected through this situation now. Better to proceed with transparency than more secrecy. I appreciated his perspective, so different from the calculating approaches of Elio and Genevieve. What do you need from me? If anything, nothing specific, he said. Just awareness of where I stand. My attorney will handle the legal aspects of establishing paternity if necessary. I only wanted to inform you directly, as a courtesy. As our conversation concluded and we prepared to leave, Caleb hesitated. May I ask you something personal? You can ask, I replied cautiously. How are you so composed through all this? If I were in your position, husband cheating, pregnant mistress, divorce negotiations, I'd be a wreck. I considered his question thoughtfully. I separated the emotional aspects from the practical ones, I explained. The marriage was already failing before Genevieve entered the picture. The affair and pregnancy just accelerated the inevitable conclusion. That's remarkably pragmatic, he observed. It's how I've survived, I said simply. And how I'll move forward. The signed divorce papers sat on my desk, the final period at the end of an 8-year sentence I hadn't realized I was serving until it was almost complete. Next to them, a bottle of champagne Cleo had sent over with a note, not to celebrate the end, but to toast your new beginning. I hadn't opened it yet, despite the successful conclusion of the divorce, with terms even more favorable than I'd initially hoped for. I found myself in a contemplative mood rather than a celebratory one. My phone buzzed with a text from Naomi courtesy update G confronted E outside his office today. Heated exchange. She left in tears. E immediately called Walsh, monitoring situation. So the fallout between Elio and Genevieve was proceeding as anticipated. With the divorce settled and his financial obligations to me clearly defined, Elio was likely distancing himself from Genevieve and her increasingly questionable pregnancy claims. I felt no satisfaction in their troubles, no vindictive pleasure in watching their alliance crumble, only a weary recognition of the predictable consequences of choices made from selfish motives rather than genuine connection. My office door opened, and Cleo appeared, elegant as always in a charcoal suit that complemented her dark complexion. You didn't open the champagne, she observed, settling into the chair across from my desk. Not in the mood, I admitted. Understandable, she said, studying me. Victory often feels different than we expect, especially when it includes something significant. 8 years, I mused. Almost a decade of my life invested in a relationship that ended with legal documents and asset divisions. Better than ending with nothing, she pointed out pragmatically. You protected what mattered: your financial security, your home, your professional standing. I did, I agreed. Exactly as planned. But, I sighed, leaning back in my chair. But I can't help wondering if I could have seen the warning signs sooner. If I wasted years trying to make a partnership work with someone who fundamentally couldn't accept my success. You can't change the past, Cleo said gently. Only learn from it. Oh, I've learned, I assured her with a small smile. Never again will I compromise my instincts or security for someone else's ego. Never again will I make myself smaller to make a partner feel bigger. Good, she declared emphatically. That's what you should take from this: not regret for the years spent, but wisdom for the years ahead. I nodded, feeling something shift inside me, a burden lifting, perhaps, or a clarity emerging. You know what lets open that champagne after all. As Cleo expertly popped the cork and poured 2 glasses, I found myself looking toward the future with a sense of possibility I hadn't felt in years. The divorce was finalized. The house was secure, and for the first time in my adult life, I answered to no one but myself. To new beginnings, Cleo toasted, raising her glass. And to clarity, I added, clinking my glass against hers. Hard won, but worth every battle. Cleo studied me over the rim of her glass. What now? Extended vacation, dating, throw yourself into work. Honestly, I considered the question. I think I need some time to reacquaint myself with who I am without all this. I gestured to the divorce papers, without the strategies and defenses and constant vigilance. Sounds healthy? She approved. No inspirational quotes about rising from ashes. Please? I scoffed. I didn't rise from ashes. I navigated a storm I saw coming from miles away and emerged completely dry while everyone else drowned. The metaphor was apt enough to draw a genuine laugh from me, perhaps my first since this ordeal began. It felt strange, unfamiliar, as if my face had forgotten the proper configuration for honest amusement. What now? Cleo asked after my laughter subsided. The house is secured, the divorce is final, Elio is dealt with. What does Candace Archer do next? I gazed out the window at the city skyline, considering the question. Tomorrow I'll drive to the mountains, to my father's cabin, seek some quiet and simplicity, not to hide, but to reacquaint myself with the woman I am beyond strategies and defenses. The woman who survived and won? Cleo nodded approvingly. Yes, I agreed. But who needs now to remember who she is beneath the armor? 6 months later, I stood in the great room of the beach house, surveying the transformation. Gone were Elio's carefully curated art pieces and the formal furniture chosen more for appearance than comfort. In their place, I'd created a space that reflected my true tastes, comfortable seating arranged to maximize the ocean view, bookshelves filled with well-read volumes, a writing desk positioned to catch the morning light. The divorce had been finalized months ago. The paternity question resolved through testing that confirmed what we'd suspected. Caleb Richardson was indeed the father of Genevieve's baby. Last I'd heard, they were negotiating a co-parenting arrangement, with Genevieve's leverage significantly diminished by the revelation that she had deliberately misled Elio about the paternity. As for Elio himself, I thought of him rarely now. The anger and betrayal had faded to a dull acknowledgement of time misspent, lessons learned. I didn't hate either of them anymore. Just didn't think of either of them anymore. Just a distant recognition of the roles they played in my story before exiting the stage. Have you heard from Elio at all? Cleo asked, settling into one of the new lounge chairs on my deck overlooking the ocean. She'd come for our monthly dinner, a tradition we'd established after the divorce. Not directly, I replied, handing her a glass of wine. His attorney contacted mine about some final tax matters last month, but otherwise, silence. Good riddance, she declared with characteristic bluntness. I smiled, finding I agreed completely. The 2 months I'd spent at my father's cabin after the divorce had provided exactly the perspective I'd needed time to shed the defensive strategies that had become second nature during the marriage and divorce. To rediscover interests and passions that had been set aside, I returned to the beach house renewed, clear-eyed about what I wanted from the next chapter of my life. I'd taken on new cases at the firm, causes I believed in rather than just clients who could pay the highest fees. I'd reconnected with friends who had drifted away during my marriage, people whose company I genuinely enjoyed, and I'd reclaimed the house completely, transforming it from a showplace designed to impress into a true home that reflected my authentic self. The woman who had sat across from her husband in a seafood restaurant 8 months ago to face her husband and his pregnant mistress wouldn't have recognized this version of herself, not in her newfound comfort with uncertainty, not in her willingness to pursue satisfaction over status, not in her ability to view the beach house as truly hers alone. That transformation, more than the legal victory or financial security, was the true resolution of the conflict Elio and Genevieve had unknowingly initiated. Any dating prospects on the horizon? Cleo asked, interrupting my reflections. I laughed, shaking my head. Not a priority at the moment. I'm enjoying my own company too much to complicate it with someone else's. Fair enough, she conceded. Though when you do decide to venture back into those waters, I know several eligible men who wouldn't try to dim your light to make theirs seem brighter. I'll keep that in mind, I promised. Though, in truth, I wasn't certain I'd ever seek that kind of partnership again. Not because the divorce had left me bitter or distrustful, but because I'd discovered something unexpected in its aftermath. I was complete on my own, neither needing nor wanting someone else to validate my choices or share my space. Perhaps that would change someday. Perhaps not. For now, I was content with the rhythms of my reclaimed life challenging work, meaningful friendships, quiet evenings watching the sunset from my deck, answering to no one's expectations but my own. 2 years to the day after Elio's announcement at the seafood restaurant, an elegant invitation arrived his wedding to a corporate attorney he'd met through professional circles. I was surprised to be included, though I suspected the gesture was more about demonstrating how amicably our divorce had concluded than any genuine desire for my presence. I hadn't decided yet whether to attend, but the invitation no longer carried emotional weight, just an interesting footnote in a chapter already completed. Elio remained in Chicago, occasionally appearing in financial news for moderate professional achievements. According to mutual acquaintances, he had recently begun dating someone new, a corporate attorney. Ironically enough, I wished them well with genuine indifference. Setting my coffee down, I moved to the deck and leaned against the railing, watching waves crash against the cliffs below. The house stood firm, weathering storms just as I had weathered mine. And like the house, I remained standing stronger for having been tested, more authentically myself for having shed what no longer served me. The sun dipped toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Another day ending, another beginning on its heels, the cycle continuing, as it always had and always would. I smiled, feeling a profound peace settle over me. Whatever came next, career advancements, new relationships, unexpected challenges, I would face it with the same clear-eyed pragmatism and quiet strength that had brought me through the divorce, not as a wounded survivor seeking redemption, but as a woman who had discovered her true worth and would never again accept anything less than she deserved. The storm had passed, and I remained exactly where I belonged. The beach house stands silent now, save for the eternal rhythm of waves against the cliffs below. 8 years of marriage ended not with tears or recriminations, but with strategy and calculation. The battlefield cleared, the papers signed, the house still mine. They say victory should taste sweet. Sometimes it just tastes like freedom. I watched the sunset paint the ocean in shades of gold and crimson from my deck of view I fought to keep, not just because of its beauty, but because it represents something I'd almost forgotten my worth. The woman who sat across from her husband and his pregnant secretary 8 months ago wouldn't recognize this version of herself, not in her comfort with solitude, not in her refusal to make herself smaller for someone else's ego. That's the curious thing about betrayal. It strips away pretense, burns away compromise, leaves only truth in its wake. The house remains where it belongs with me, standing firm on the cliff. And like the house, I remain standing stronger for having been tested, more authentically myself for having shed what no longer served me. The storm has passed. The war is won. And in the quiet aftermath, I've discovered something unexpected. The most valuable thing I reclaimed wasn't the house at all. It was myself.